Hey, greetings everybody. Gleekon here with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. In the last one, we started to finally get into the dated, recorded history of Draenor, with 3,000 years before the Dark Portal. So we had ended at about 45 years before the Dark Portal, something in that ballpark range, essentially with the birth of Medivh. And now we're kind of backpedaling a little bit to find out what happened. And recently we've found out how the orcs and ogres were descended from a sort of a demigod named Grond, and the original life forms of Draenor, how there were the breakers in that line, which includes the orcs, and the primals, which was a plant-based life, how they have been constantly in conflict. There are elements that are more on the side of the breakers, the elementals, and the Furies, which are the head ones. And then recently, just in the midst of all of that, an avian race called the Arakoa has been given birth from a sort of god. It's actually called a god. I would describe it more of a demigod, Rukmar. And she was a good god. She created the sentient race, a little bit proud. And they've been sort of observing, developing their society, creating these high outposts. They've called themselves the Apexis. They just sort of look down on the constant battling between the botani plant people and orcs and Gron and all of them. So stay a while and listen to this one. We've jumped forward 1,000 years. This is called the Heralds of the Evergrowth. We are now 2,000 years before the Dark Portal. The Arakoa's rise did not go unnoticed by Draenor's other inhabitants. Near Arak, the dense forest of Talador teemed with primals. One of the most powerful was a treant known as Gnarlgar. Much like Rukmar and her kin, this highly intelligent living tree emerged in the aftermath of Bhutan's destruction. Gnarlgar commanded immense power over nature magic, as well as the spirit of life that flowed through the wilds. I think what's interesting here is we have treants evolving separately on two separate planets. Ridiculously improbable, but this is a magical universe. But we do have treants on Azeroth as well. Gnarlgar's knowledge of the ancient days was also vast. From the Venusaur, the treant learned of the Evergrowth, the sporemounds, and the communal sentience that had bound the forests as one. For millennia, Gnarlgar roamed the world on legs of tangled roots. The treant used its magics to strengthen the other primals in their war against the breakers. Gnarlgar also honed its own abilities and learned how to influence the minds of its plant kin. Before long, the treant could manipulate other primals and guide their actions. This doesn't necessarily seem benign, but we'll see. Gnarlgar found the botani to be the most promising of the world's primals. If they were cultivated properly, the treant knew they could become a force of extraordinary might. Gnarlgar became the botani's caretaker, and it refined their culture. The treant taught them the truth of the sporemounds, convincing them that they would one day restore the Evergrowth to its former glory. And it explains why in Warlords of Draenor you have the botani sort of worshipping these giant treant-type figures. Though the botani existed throughout Draenor, those in Talador were the most numerous and advanced. They became the heart of their race's culture. Gnarlgar taught Talador's botani unique ways to harness nature magic. They crafted pools of potent nature energies, which they used to transfer the spirits of fallen Venusaur into new bodies, so they've got reincarnation going on. While the botani focused their attention on battling the breakers, Gnarlgar became aware of the Apexis. Their civilization was an affront against nature itself, something artificial that did not belong on the world. What was worse, the Arakoa abused the wilds and killed entire forests to build their unnatural golden temples and cities. Gnarlgar knew that these Arakoa were something far more dangerous than the breakers. Their devastating magics had the power to burn nature to cinders or inundate it with shadow energy. Unless the Arakoa were stopped, Gnarlgar believed they would soon conquer the whole of Draenor. The treant would not let that come to pass. Gnarlgar departed Talador in search of something from the primordial days, something it could use as a weapon against the Apexis. In time, the treant came across a massive fossilized root, one of the few intact pieces of baton that still remain in the world. And again, this does not seem at all benign. I get like a different mentality that a plant that wants to seek the original hive mind status, is just trying to get back to that state. But obviously there are flaws in the logic that just because something is alien to a planet, it's automatically not welcome there. And it's wrong that the Eriko they don't want to take over Draenor at all. They actually consider themselves aloof and separate from it. And killing the plants to live in them is bad, but by that token, so is killing any animal to eat it. They're killing the plants and they're using it for shelter. Well, and for, I guess, ostentatious reasons too. So, there are elements where I can see it being okay, but they're shaping this plant race really out to be evil. After returning to Talador, Gnarlgar rallied the Botani to its side and made a proclamation. To revive the Evergrowth, they must first defeat the blasphemous apex of civilization. Then the treant revealed the root it had recovered. Gnarlgar told the Botani they would use it to craft a new sporemound, one greater than any that had come before it. The monstrous creature would stand at the head of their army and cast the apexes from their lofty spire. Gnarlgar planted the root deep within Talador and began a great ritual to nourish it. Thousands of Botani willingly sacrificed themselves, and the treant infused their spirits into the root. Slowly, leaves and branches sprouted from the earth. These in turn grew into a mound of thorny brambles and leathery fronds. Gnarlgar named the burgeoning thorn mound Tala. I want to say that's the name of the city in Nagrand. Something like that. As Tala took shape, the primals made preparations for war. The Botani awakened new Genosaur from their birthing pools. Meanwhile, Gnarlgar channeled the spirit of life into the forest and gifted thousands of trees with intelligence and will. I also think it's interesting how in Shadowlands there are Genosaur basic birthing pools in the Ardenweald. So these little things, they do a good job of like keeping the people that work there. You've got to show that you're like a lore expert. Okay, he created an army of treants. These trees became known as the Gnarled. I like that, the etymology of the Gnarled. It in our language has, trees can be whorled and gnarled, but then you have it in this sense coming from Gnarlgar, so that's fun. They uprooted themselves and walked the earth just as their creator did. Gnarlgar ordered them to form the front lines of its army, enchanting their trunks and boughs to ward off the Eriko's flames and shadowy curses. Tens of thousands of primals, bristling with nature magic and bedecked in armor of thorns, gathered in Talador. There they watched and they waited as Tala's awakening neared. Okay. So, in and of itself, there's not much going on here other than that you have the awakening of many more treants. And obviously Tala is not, or Tala is not a maintained force on Draenor. But we know that, again, that the Eriko are going to get jacked. So I think this is all build up to that. Okie dokie, guys. Another episode in the pipes, 5x5. Thank you all so much for listening. And I'll catch you on the next episode of Lore of Warcraft.